Hey Frank, got your question about how do you in a solo guitar performance play a piece like this and have it last 5 6 minutes and keep it more interesting, which is a great question, and I think it really relates to sort of where you're at in your development too, because I mean there's a lot of possible answers to this. And a lot of ways of looking at the question in terms of like what's interesting and all of that sort of stuff. It can go pretty deep, and who finds it interesting. But I think I get your basic question is how do you feel like you're playing in an interesting way, sort of 4 or 5 minutes, where it's like okay, this is pretty good, and the way you've been playing the tune, and this is a great thing about the way we've been doing the lessons, is I've gotten to watch you play your examples over and over again. So, you're playing the chord melody with what I would consider a pretty much a stock arrangement every time, which is fine. That's totally cool. Um, and then you go into the solo section, and we've sort of been in the beginning we did a bunch of exercises and stuff in order to build up to it. And what seems to be happening, either you're either doing this unconsciously, very naturally, or you're sort of on some level aware of it, or somewhere in there, you are really almost doing an arranged solo, right? So I notice in many of the sections of the tune, you play almost the same thing every time. So it's not 100% that way, but often when you're playing over the C major to C minor, you kind of solo right there. And when you are in the final section, it's almost always right here, and it's almost the same basic licks that you're playing right here. Um, and the parts you go to the chords, you tend to play on the C minor, you always play this chord, or you'll do that walk down thing. But there's not a ton of variation going on, which is fine because right now you're just trying to put this together. So within that, um, you're sort of learning a lesson. One nice thing about doing it this way is the way we're going back and forth is, on the surface, on one level, your goal is to learn to play this piece, right? This song, Green Dolphin Street. But and that's awesome, and that's what it's going to become. On the other hand, you're sort of being confronted with things because of learning to do it, that are maybe in some ways, they're related to Green Dolphin Street, but they're applicable to larger musical questions. An example is the timing issues, right? Like those timing issues that you're having, you know, you don't do it all the time, and some of them you do less than others, but you could say that you're regularly being confronted by issues with your timing. Um, so the more and the way you're going to get better at your timing is by keeping being confronted by it and then being like, shit, I need to be more focused on nailing my timing. So that back and forth of me just being like, yeah, you keep drop this, you added measures here. You got to be like, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to fix it. And over time, you'll fix all those problems. And so that's the added benefit timing. Um, and that we're now by seeing as you're learning this tune that every time you're playing through your solo, you play a lot of the same stuff in the same locations on the guitar. I mean, I'm not saying it's exact, but there's a lot of similarity if you went back and watched all those videos. Where you play chords, where you play single lines, and where on the neck, and what's parts of the tune even. So coming back to our question, the way you do it is you need more variety of vocabulary, chordal and melodic, um, going on, throughout the tune. So there are a number of ways to get there. You know, one simple way would be something like this. You say, okay, you've done one chorus, but maybe you need to have, say, 6 total choruses that you can play, and you work it out where, um, 3 of the for each section. Let's say we take the first 2 measures, the first 4 measures: C major, C minor. 3 of them you're playing with chords, and 3 of them you're playing with lines. So in 3 of the versions, the arrangements that you're doing, or ways of playing through the tune, 3 times when you get to that C major to C minor, 3 of the versions will have chords there. So you won't be playing lines, and the other 3 you'll be playing lines. And then for each version that has chords, let's say, when you play chords, it can't be the same chords every time. So one version has maybe some chords up here, one has some chords here, one has some chords here, some different movements. Same with the lines, different locations, different vibe on the lines each time. So, and you do that for each section of the tune in each arrangement. So you get 6 completely different versions, varying register, where the chords, where the notes are, all that stuff. That's one way to do it. And that's something we could be leading up to as we're going through this stuff. The most common way people have dealt with this, probably the bulk of musicians over the history of jazz, the last 100 years or whatever, through transcribing, from learning, from stealing stuff from other players. So I did it when I was coming up, from all my favorite players, from Charlie Parker to Joe Pass and so on. Just learning how to play different things. So that's certainly another way. That's a really key thing. That's not something that pertains exactly to this tune, but it would affect all the playing of all tunes. Another way to attack this is to break it up in those little exercises that I showed you, where you're just like, okay, we're just going to do the chord melody and then C major to C minor. And I think I even gave you some where we didn't do the chord melody. We just play, okay, C major, C minor, right? Well, how could you play that? Let's say you're going to play lines, but what kinds of different lines could you play? Your most common area of the neck that I see you play is around here. And it's usually something like this kind of a phrase, stuff like that. Okay, well, what about down here? And so forth. Every melodic statement, major to minor, or the DC. I noticed that you're always, where are you doing those lines over the minor 7, G7 to C? The next part, you tend to do it in the same spot. You got to be able to do it everywhere on the neck, So that's register and variance of location, basically. And then you can also be thinking about content, what are you playing on the tune? What types of lines? Maybe you want to transcribe, and what would somebody like, who are your favorite players? What would Wes Montgomery play on this tune? And which brings up, what about octaves? There's another thing you could do. So you're sort of looking for variation, but certainly, being able to vary what you're doing and is going to give you a lot more freedom. Also, even things like, let's say you stay in the same location right here, what could you do to make it sound different? Like, if you're usually playing something like that, right? Well, so how about something totally different? Why don't we take something like so that's just like a very simple thing, but what I'm thinking about is playing very starting lower and playing very specific rhythm. What if I tried to get a more just like a more of a melody sound instead of like a swinging kind of a sound, like let's see, 2, 3, 4. I don't just something, just exploring like how I could get different melodies out of this area besides what I'm going for every time. So all of those are sort of techniques to building the ability to play things that are more than just an arrangement or a repetition of the same idea. All that being said, there's like long-term goals and short-term goals also. I mean, if you had a gig playing solo guitar at some point, and you could only play one chorus, then you just could learn more tunes also. And learning tunes is great. And then over time, you add to your vocabulary. I know that when I started playing gigs, playing jazz, I was really bad, and there was a lot of shit I couldn't play at all. So I just I played a lot of simple stuff, and I repeated myself a lot. And and while I was doing that, in order to just get through the gigs without totally embarrassing myself, which I did plenty, I was at home practicing for the stuff that would get me, work transcribing and working on like how could I sound better, in hopes that down the line that would click. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Feel free to follow up with any of the stuff I've mentioned if you have more questions about it, or if you think some of it sounds of specific interest to you, or whatever. It's like, this is a conversation, and I want to make sure that these kind of explanations and concepts work for you. All right, man. Great job. I'll talk to you soon.